This video is powered by BetUS. With the college football season just a couple of weeks away, let's go ahead and make some predictions. Let's predict how the college football season will go. I went ahead, I crunched the numbers, I went through the scheddies, and this is how I think the college football top 25 will look by the end of the season. I'm also going to go over who I think will make the playoffs and how that playoff will look. So let's go ahead, get into it. First, I want to cover some of the teams that just missed my list. For instance, Oklahoma, they're kind of a mystery at quarterback. We saw a little bit of their new QB in the bowl game last season. There was ups, there was downs. And with this being Oklahoma's first season in the SEC, I think they're going to take some lumps and bumps. USC is in a similar predicament with a new quarterback, a new signal caller who had a very, very good bowl game. I think he threw like 6 touchdowns, but is that defense going to be any better? Again, this is their first year in the Big Ten, so I think that's going to be pretty interesting. You got NC State as well. They transferred well. They used the portal, I think, really well. They brought in some old heads. You got Grayson McCall there coming over from Coastal Carolina. I think they're going to be maybe just on the outside looking in or somewhere in that like 19 to 25 range. And then Virginia Tech is my dark horse. This is a team with a ton of talent that's been playing better and better and better. I love their defense. The defensive line's pretty darn solid, rock solid, if you will. They have 2 of the best corners in the nation in Strong and in Delane. And then on offense, we saw some positives from drones last season, and the receiving core it's kind of nuts. So watch out for Virginia Tech. I think they might surprise a lot of people, and if they end up being like 9-3, it wouldn't shock me that much. West Virginia, also, you had Green having a good season last year. I think they'll probably be in that 8-win window. I think that's probably where they're going to end up around, which means they'll probably be either on the outside looking in or somewhere at the bottom of that college football top 25. Oregon State, they're a team without a home, and their schedule is actually relatively easy. I think they're probably an 8 or 9 win team this season. We also have Memphis, who there's a good chance that they win the AAC, but it's going to go through one game in particular, and we'll talk about that actually when we get to my college football top 25. It's a really good squad there, though, at Memphis. JMU, a lot of questions with now their coach off at Indiana. They had some transfers, but I think they're still going to be a relatively solid team in the Sun Belt. UNLV, I think there's a good case for them to be the team to come out of the Mountain West and win that conference, but they're not going to come out unscathed. I think this is another team that'll be like 8 or 9 wins, but probably on the outside looking in. Really good squad. Like, I love Ricky White. I love they brought in Tony Grimes. Didn't play last season. Someone who was a highly, highly sought out recruit. It's a good squad there. It is a good squad. Tulane, they lost a lot. They lost their coach, but I mean, I feel like they're still one of the better teams in the AAC. Let's go ahead. Let's get to this college football top 25, starting with Oklahoma State. The Cowboys bring back like 18 starters from last season. That's stupid good. This is going to be, or at least this should be, a very good squad who will have their season decided during a 3-week stretch where they face Utah, Kansas State, and West Virginia. Fortunately, 2 out of those 3 games will be at home. So Oklahoma State, I think, probably ends up higher on this list just because, again, they got a lot of veteran talent, and the schedule outside of that 3-game stretch isn't so bad. Toledo is here at 24. I have them as the MAC championship winners. Jason Candle's done a wonderful job for the Rockets. He's 20-8 the last 2 seasons. He was so close to winning the MAC last season. He won it the year before. I think he comes back and he gets that 3rd MAC title. If you look at their schedule, all their tougher like in-conference games are all at home. Miami, Ohio's at home. Bowling Green's at home. Ohio's at home. So I think this team should do fairly well. And then you got Kansas. Listen, I love that backfield. It's probably one of the scariest backfields in all of football in Jalen Daniels, you got Devin Neal, you got Daniel Highshaw. But can Jalen stay healthy? That's kind of the big question, and I think that's kind of what holds this team back, so I got them here at 23. At 22, I have Kansas State, and Kansas State honestly should end up being a big riser. I think I have them too low. Listen, the schedule is super ideal. Like, they don't play Utah, they play Arizona, Kansas, and Oklahoma State at home. It's just with Kansas State, my worry is this team dropping a game to someone that they should beat, because they do it every stinking year. Last year, it was Iowa State at the end of the season. The year before that, it was Tulane. And you know what? They're going to have to travel to Tulane this season. I think Houston could be a sneaky loss in there. Fun fact, their new head coach, Willie Fritz, was the head coach of Tulane when they beat Kansas State 2 years ago. And on top of that, they end the season against Matt Campbell's Cyclones, and that's going to be at Iowa State. So it's just, there's a lot of things where I could see them tripping up and slipping up. And then at 21, I got UTSA. I have them winning the AAC. I believe in Jeff Traylor. He has done a wonderful job for the Roadrunners and honestly deserves a coaching spot somewhere in the Power 4. I think that could happen maybe after this season. Listen, I know he's got a new quarterback, but the schedule isn't bad. Aside from playing Texas, their second hardest game is an in-conference game against Memphis, which probably will decide the AAC, but they get that at home, and I think that's the big indicator. That's why I lean UTSA over Memphis, and I got him here at 21. Before we continue with the top 25, let's talk about BetUS. Use the link in the description or the pinned comment to take advantage of an insane 125% sign-in bonus up to $2,000 on your first 3 deposits. And we're talking about the college football top 25 today. We're talking about who may win their conference championships, who will make it to the college football playoff. You can make all those bets at BetUS. If you got a good feel on who's going to win the Big 10 or the Big 12, the SEC, or you can bet on your favorite college football team's win total. They have every FBS team here. So you can make those bets at BetUS. Take advantage of this great offer that they have. And as always, bet responsibly, bet within your means. Back to the video. Let's move on to 20 as I have Tennessee. Nico looked great at quarterback in the bowl game, and now he will be the starter. But it could be a rude awakening once the conference play begins. This is going to be his first season as the full-time starter and against actual SEC competition. Listen, the team's talented. The skill maker position is really good. They have one of the best defensive players in college football in James Pierce Jr. And I'm a bit on the fence with their schedule. They take on Alabama, they take on Georgia, they also have Kentucky and Oklahoma. Those games aren't easy wins. I think they probably lose to Bama and Georgia, and Kentucky and Oklahoma. If they can win both those games, that's huge for the squad, but I think they probably lose one of those games. But I think a big indicator will come in week 2, where Nico's going to have to take on a very good NC State team. That game's not a foregone conclusion, and that's a good Wolfpack team. So the schedule is a little bit tough, and that's why I'm a little bit lower on Tennessee. I got Louisville at 19. They brought in a lot of talent via the transfer portal. Tyler Shuck is an experienced quarterback. They bring in Ja'Cory Brooks, who is a former Alabama wide receiver, while Colin Lacey was an absolute dog for South Alabama last season. They also brought in Harvard transfer Thor Griffith. He's going to join Ashton Jalote there on the defensive line. This should be a very good Cardinals team with a reasonably manageable schedule. If they can beat either Miami or Florida State, then they should probably find themselves in the ACC championship game. And then at 18, I have LSU. Listen, I believe in Garrett Nussmeier. I do. This schedule, it's very promising with all their difficult games at home. They get Ole Miss at home. They get Bama at home. They get Oklahoma at home. Matter of fact, USC That's going to be a neutral site game. But I just can't get behind this defense, man. And on top of that, you're replacing two of the best wide receivers in football last year in Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. So there's just a few questions there for me. But if the defense is better, if some other receivers just emerge there, I mean, they still have Kyron Lacey, who was pretty solid as a third option last season, then yeah, LSU should be maybe a 10-win team and could be competing for the SEC, but I think that's a bit of rose-tinted glasses, if you will. And then SMU here at 17. Preston Stone is a baller and the schedule is very favorable. I honestly think it's probably the easiest ACC schedule of any of those teams in the ACC. Aside from Florida State and Louisville, like the Mustangs honestly should win out and probably end up being a 10-win team. I'm just calling it. And then I have another ACC team here in my Miami Hurricanes. The U, baby, the U. I'm a big Hurricanes fan. And listen, as a Hurricanes fan, I find it hard to believe in this team. And that is all on Mario Cristobal. Like, I just don't believe he's the right man for the job. However, they do bring in Cam Ward. They bring in Damon Martinez. They bring in Samuel Brown. And all those players are going to be huge for the offense. They still have Jacoby George and Xavier Restrepo there. So the offense, especially now with the offensive line being a little bit more veteran, that offense should slap. Should be really, really good. I have a lot of questions about the defense. But like, this is probably Miami's best chance to win the ACC. And mind you, they have never won the ACC since joining. So this is their best chance to do that. I just have a hard time believing in it. I just do. That's unfortunately the facts there. That's just me being a Hurricanes fan. Listen, I'm going to be rooting for him, but I have a hard time believing in him. Let's go to this top 15. I got Clemson. We got a little roll on ACC teams. Here at 15, I don't believe in Cade Klubnik. I just don't. But I do believe in the trenches. It's a veteran offensive line, and the defensive line is always just rock solid. I think they're probably going to get dog walked by Georgia in the opener. But after that, it's really not so bad for them. They get Florida State and Tallahassee. That there's probably a good chance that decides who goes to the ACC championship game. But they also have a couple of games I'm like, don't sleep on. Like, don't sleep on Louisville. Don't sleep on Virginia Tech. So Clemson, I think they're a good squad. It's just I don't think they're a ACC. I don't think they're going to be in the run for the ACC championship. I just don't. But then again, they are the second highest ACC team I have on this list. But, I mean, you got teams like Louisville and Miami and SMU that I have really closely ranked. NC State, Virginia Tech, you can't count those teams out. Georgia Tech, watch out for them. They're not pushovers anymore. As a Hurricanes fan, I unfortunately know. But, yeah, that's what I got on Clemson. Let's go to Arizona. U of A, they bring back one of the deadliest quarterback wide receiver combos in college football in Fafita and McMillan. Takario Davis is an absolute alien. But I am curious how this team will be under a new head coach. They bring in former San Jose State head coach Brent Brennan, and I'm just curious. I'm not familiar with them, so I'm curious what this team will look like by comparison of what they were last season. If Arizona, honestly, if they could beat either Utah or Kansas State, and those two games are on the road, then they probably should be playing for the Big 12 championship game. Those are the two hardest games on their schedule. They get them within like a 3-week span. So we'll see with Arizona. Oregon at 13 sucks. I really do think this is like a top 3, top 4 team in terms of talent on the roster. Dylan Gabriel is a winning quarterback. However, the Ducks have to face both Ohio State and Michigan this season. Granted, they get Ohio State in Eugene, but that's still going to be tough as hell. They also travel to Madison to face Wisconsin, which could be a sneaky loss there. It's just, I feel like Oregon, they could be one of these like 10-win teams that end up on the outside looking in just simply because the college football playoff, they allow a group of 5 conference championship winner to make the playoff. So I think Oregon could end up on the outside looking in potentially because of that. But it's a great team. They a lot of people have them in the top 5, the top 3, and I think from a talent standpoint, I don't disagree. But new quarterback, but I mean, it's Dylan Gabriel. I think he's going to be solid. We'll see how things go offensively. At 12, I have Liberty. Here's the team I have making the college football playoff. That's a group of 5 team. They should go undefeated. The Flames have one of the easiest schedules among any team in the top 25. They returned some playmakers, including their quarterback there. So I have them making the college football playoff, going undefeated. Florida State. Here at 11, I've been a DJU believer for years now, but my faith is waning. It truly is. This is a team that has a lot of talent around him, and they really only need one win over either Clemson or Miami to make it to that ACC championship game, and all they got to do is win to get in. They do have tough games against like Notre Dame and Florida. I don't think those are going to be gimme games, but they really just need to win the ACC. That's it. They do get Clemson in Tallahassee, so that's kind of huge. It means they don't necessarily have to win that Miami game if they can win in Tallahassee. We'll see. I think Florida State somehow sneaks out with the ACC championship, though. At number 10, I have Penn State. The defense will be great, but the question is, do you believe in Drew Aller? For one, you know what? I believe in the new OC. I believe in Andy Kotelnicki, who was the OC over at Kansas. I think he could probably unlock Drew Aller. We all know that in terms of like his physical and athletic gifts, it's all there. So I'm excited to see how this offense will look like this upcoming season, and worst case scenario, they're just going to run the ball a ton with 2 very gifted running backs. At number 9, I have Texas. This feels a bit low, but a lot of that has to do with schedule. The Longhorns, they're going to win games through the trenches this year. They have a great offensive and defensive line. The really big question is, can the secondary hold up, and can Quinn Ewers just be consistent? And like, Texas probably plays the most important non-conference game of the year when they travel to Ann Arbor in week 2. It's gonna be tough, and it's gonna be an interesting, I think, litmus test of what to expect for the remainder of the season. Keep in mind, this is Texas' first year in the SEC, but hey, they beat a good Alabama team last year. I don't think they're gonna have a problem. That's why I have them in my top 10. At number 8, I got Missouri. Brady Cook is back at quarterback. That's a good thing. Luther Burden is one of the best wide receivers in the country. That's a great thing. The question will be, well, is the defense going to be solid enough this year? But they do play a relatively easy schedule compared to other SEC teams. They do have to travel to Tuscaloosa, but aside from that, this team should be, like, worst case scenario, 10-2. But I think they probably end up 11-1. At number 7, I have a Notre Dame. Notre Dame has one of the best defenses in college football, and they also bring in former Duke quarterback Riley Leonard, which is kind of funny because he's going to be facing his former head coach week 1. But the schedule isn't bad. There's no Ohio State this season, so the schedule really isn't that bad. They get Florida State and Louisville at home, but they do open the season at College Station against Texas A&M, and then they finish the season at USC in the Coliseum. I honestly think out of those 4 games, they could probably lose 2 and still make the college football playoff at 10-2. So I just think the odds are kind of in their favor, like I said, especially with no Ohio State on the schedule. The big question with them is that the defense is great. They brought in some talent via the transfer portal, but the offensive line, well, the tackle position, they lost 2 tackles to the NFL last season, and they just lost Charles Jagsaw with a torn pectoral for the season. He was supposed to be the starter at left tackle. So the question will be, how will those tackle spots be? But for the most part, I believe in Notre Dame to make the college football playoff. At number 6, I got Utah. Kyle Whittingham is one of the best coaches in the country, and this team gets back Cam Rising and Brant Kuthi after they both missed last season. Their schedule isn't difficult with Arizona at home, and honestly, probably their tougher matchup being Oklahoma State in Stillwater. Like, past those two games, it's not a difficult schedule. I think Utah should be the favorite to win the Big 12 this season. Let's go to the top 5, starting with Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin has used the transfer portal to perfection, but he hasn't just done that, but he's also developed players through the transfer portal. Look at guys like Jackson Dart and USC's Bentley. There's Trey Harris, Caden Pricecorn. You got Jared Ivey, JJ Peegs. Like, they were all really good players for the Rebels last season. My only question is that offensive line, because they do bring in a lot of new faces, but there's no denying like the sheer amount of talent on this squad. And number 4, I have Alabama. Listen, I know it's no Nick Saban, but Alabama is still Alabama. This roster is loaded, and much of how this season goes will be down to the development of Jalen Milroe. The road schedule is a little harder than past years with Wisconsin, Tennessee, LSU, and Oklahoma, but they get Georgia and Missouri at home, and I think that's pretty huge. Those are arguably their toughest opponents on the schedule. I think Alabama probably gets into the playoff. Along with Michigan. Listen, the Wolverines, they're still immensely talented. They have the best defense in college football, and while there will be a few new names on the offensive line, I say new names just simply because they were backup players for the past few years, but it's a lot of juniors and seniors, a lot of guys that they've been developing. So I feel relatively good about that. And then they'll have Alex Orji, great name, by the way. It looks like he's going to be the opening day starter, but how much do they really need to lean on their quarterback is the question. As we saw with JJ McCarthy, they didn't have to lean on him a ton, but he also stepped up in big game situations. Can they get that from the quarterback play this year? We'll find out. At number 2, I have Ohio State. And as you can see, number 1 is Georgia. When it comes to talent, Ohio State and Georgia are the best equipped teams roster-wise. Like, Ohio State does have the easier schedule, in my opinion, but they still have to travel to Eugene, face Oregon. They still have to go to Happy Valley to face Penn State. And spoiler, I think they probably end up losing one of those games. And then you got Georgia. Georgia, they have a tough schedule. They open the year versus Clemson, and then when you look at where they need to travel, we're talking like Kentucky, Bama, Texas, Mississippi, Ole Miss. Yeah, it's a tough schedule. But this roster this roster up and down is equipped to make such a run. That's why I'm going to lean on them at my number 1. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about how the college football playoff should look if this were to happen. So the teams with byes would be your conference championship winners of the Power 5. So Ohio State, Georgia, Utah, and Florida State. Those are the teams that I leaned on. Yeah, I think they probably win their conference. Florida State's a bit of a toss-up for me, and I truly believe whoever wins the ACC will be the only ACC team to actually get in. And then, of course, you got Liberty. They're the 12th seed because they win. I have them winning Conference USA. I have them being undefeated. So they're that one group of 5 team that ends up making it. As for the rest, like this shapes up to be a really good first round. Like, of course, yeah, you get Michigan and Liberty. Spoiler alert, I think Michigan probably just does to them what Oregon did to them this past year. But you get Missouri versus Notre Dame. That's going to be a really good game. Penn State, Alabama, don't sleep on that. And then Ole Miss and Texas ought to be a hell lot of fun. And it ought to be, in my opinion, I think it would be an offensive shootout. Even though both teams having really good squads, I think those defenses probably could turn some turnovers into actual points. And again, I mean, you're working with 2 very good offenses there. But at the end of the day, again, I have Michigan winning. I'm going to go ahead and say Mizzou sneaks one out from Notre Dame. I think Missouri is going to be a a sneaky team when it comes to the playoff, and they might be able to get a win or two here or there. Penn State, Alabama is really a toss-up, so I'm going to just go with Alabama. It really could go either way for me. And then I'm going to have Texas edge out Ole Miss. So here we go. We're in the quarterfinals now. You get Michigan, Florida State, Missouri, Georgia, Alabama, Utah, and then Texas, Ohio State being probably, I think, my game of the bunch there. That's going to be a incredibly fun game that could go really either way. But for me, I think Michigan probably edges out Florida State. I think just you got questions for both quarterbacks with DJU, Alex Orji, but it comes down to which defense is more talented, and that's the Michigan defense. And then Missouri, Georgia, Missouri already gets their moment, beating Notre Dame. I think Georgia, again, they're just built for this. This is an incredibly deep team. I think they're probably the best team in college football, so I'm going to go with Georgia. I have Utah. I think they're going to come out with a surprise victory over Alabama. I don't know how much of that is a surprise because I think no one really talks about Utah, but Utah's a really good squad. And I think, at least for Alabama to make it to the quarterfinals in DeBoer's first season would be considered a success. So I'm going to go with Utah. And then, again, this Texas-Ohio State game is a coin toss, and which is kind of wild because I think who wins this game probably goes to the national championship. Spoiler alert. I'm going to go with Ohio State. Again, I think they're right up there with Georgia as being one of the most just deep and talent-rich rosters in college football. So let's go ahead and move on to the semifinals that would match up Michigan versus Georgia, Utah versus Ohio State. I kind of already spoiled that I got Ohio State going over Utah. Again, it's just a very talent-rich squad. And Utah, they get their big win against Bama. I don't know if they could do that against an Ohio State. And then for me, Georgia and Michigan comes down to the quarterback play, and Carson Beck's simply just a better quarterback than Alex Orji. To be fair, we haven't seen much, if anything, of Alex Orji, which kind of could play against me. Maybe he comes out and he's just freaking studded, but I guess we'll find out. But I'm going to go with Georgia. So I know this is kind of a boring prediction that I have my 1 and 2 seed, but getting that first round bye is kind of huge. And when you do look at, like, Ohio State probably has the tougher road as Georgia takes on Michigan and Missouri, though I would argue that the Texas game, which that could be the game that flips this whole thing on their head. Like I said earlier, that probably the winner of that Texas-Ohio State game makes it to the college football championship. So really, it's a coin toss, and if your coin lands on Texas, you can insert Texas versus Georgia, which would be a rematch. That'd be kind of fun. But I do think Ohio State and Georgia are probably the most talent-rich rosters in college football. I lean Georgia here. Could be a toss-up, but I'm going to lean Georgia. I think they're going to be pissed off after missing out on the college football playoff last season. And I think they're gonna make a run, man. I really do. But hey, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Quick shout out to BetUS. Thank you for being the sponsor of today's video. You can check out their offer in the description, or it's the link in the pinned comment. If you want to check out other content on the channel, I've been doing deep dives of every NFL team. You can check those out, or you can check out my summer scouting for the 2025 NFL draft class. I'll leave that video right over here as well. But as always, until next time, you be easy, my friends. Later.